Family call the full board of supervisors meeting order. Please rise. For silent prayer, followed by the salute of the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Press clerk, call the roll.
Parker.
Here.
Weigel.
Here.
Simmons. Sacks.
Here.
Adams. Here. Wolf.
Here.
Collins.
Here.
Ryder.
Physically ready, Madam Clerk.
Eldridge. Helsley.
Here.
Warcheck.
Here.
Livonia.
Here.
Cousin. Here. Mia.
We
Schmidt.
just walked in.
Here. He's here. Sorry, Mike, Schmidt is here. Yeah, here. Okay, Mustin. Here. Scalera. Desi.
Here.
Holding. Yes, here. Morel.
Here.
Matt.
Here.
Hoda.
Brother.
164. Residents 35.8 absent. We have a phone.
I'd like to have Jim Brake come up and introduce our auditors.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in early for this. We just completed our audit and financial statements for the year ending in 2023. We have our auditors in to give you a quick presentation, a rundown of what you have. You also have a copy in front of you in case you can't see the previous script. So Charles Trottier from Gresham Lucky is here to present the findings.
I'll get Kathy on. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jim, and good evening to everyone. I am Charles Trottier. I am a director with Gresham Lucky. We do serve as your external auditors, and this will serve as the annual audit presentation for the financial statements that were issued on September 30th. I did print this morning before I left from Buffalo some copies. I think Jim helped me print the last 8, but they don't have color on them, so I'll try to, when we get to some of the charts, I'll try to make sure I get those colors in there, identify appropriately. But first slide here, products of our audit, what you'll be receiving from us. The first one is the financial statement themselves. The financial statement's about 100 pages. All the data that's in there is sourced from the financials accounting software of the county. There's just 3 pages in there that belong to us that are on our letterhead. So although we help compile the document, there's 3 pages that are on our letterhead that I want to focus on. The first one is on the financial statement themselves, the numbers, whether they can be relied on. And based on our testing, they can be relied on. They are free of utility misstatement, so they fairly present the results of operation of the county. So the opinion that you're receiving is an unmodified opinion. That's the cleanest you can have. Free of utility misstatement. The users, whether it's be the bank, credit agencies, readers of the financial statements, they can be relied on. The second opinion is on the back of the financial statements. As a governmental entity, government auditing standards requires your external auditors to look at your controls, your internal controls, your processes, your policies, your oversight of bank reconciliations, purchasing, cash receipts. And so if there were to be any deficiencies in your internal controls, you'd have to disclose them accordingly. And so based on our testing, we believe that the inputs that go in the system that create the outputs that go in your financial statements, the processes are in place. There are no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies to report on. The very last opinion that brings these financial statements is going to be your uniform guidance, single audit. As a recipient of federal monies, well over $750,000, which is the threshold, we are required as your external auditors to put this federal agent hat, where we look at the compliance regulations that's issued, 2,000-page document issued by federal government. And we look at your different programs that offer federal funds. And we make sure that these costs for these programs are spent according with the guidelines. So this year we tested 5 programs: Medicaid, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance, or SNAP, Child Nutrition for Child Support Enforcement, Highway Planning and Construction, and your ARPA funds. They were all tested for compliance. No question costs were noted. So the spending of those funds, eligibility, people receiving those funds, the cash management, how these funds are received, and spent, and your reporting of those funds are all in accordance with federal regulations. The second bullet I touched is the single audit. The third document you're going to be receiving is New York State Department of Transportation report, similar to federal single audit. We're required to put our state hat and review your compliance with New York State DOT transportation spending. We tested your consolidated highway improvement program, your CHIPS, for compliance, all up to par. Audit recommendations, I'll touch on the next slide. And then the management letter is also an area of best practice, a document that we will issue that talks about certain things as far as, we'll touch on those in the presentation, but solid waste, deficit, and some fund balance policy discussions that are going to be included in those. Again, we'll touch on it later. On the next slide, audit communications, try and go through quickly with those, but you'll be receiving a formal written document that goes over all of these. What our responsibility is to provide that opinion. To provide that opinion, we use reasonable assurance, not absolute assurance. We don't test every transaction we be here all year. We use reasonable assurance. We'll test some samples, high risk dollar amounts. We'll elevate those to the entire population account balances. That is sufficient assurance for us to conclude that these financial statements are fair. I also like to disclose there that we're not hired to find fraud. That'd be a forensic accountant responsibility. That's often a misconception. As external auditors, we do have procedures in place that we believe would help find fraud if fraud were to exist, but it's not a number one responsibility. We do ask departments if they would be aware of certain fraud. We investigate if that comes up. And we do have procedures in place looking at journal entries, miscellaneous revenue accounts, credits to cash that would identify a fraud would exist at a significant level. We did not identify that. Significant accounting policies. No changes from the prior year, so I won't take time there. I refer you to note 1 of the financial statements that you get a chance to read those. Significant accounting estimates. Estimates just rely on a lot of judgment. They're harder for us to test. We have to rely on actuaries that provide you your reports for net pension liability, your other post-employment benefits. We have to disclose those in those letters. We tested all the assumptions. We tested the actuaries that prepared the report, the census data that's sent to these actuaries, where we believe your estimates are fair. Independence, the only way for your financials to mean something, to be relied on, they have to be free of bias. As your external auditors, myself, everyone on the engagement is independent, in fact, in appearance to the county. And then other matters, if our scope is limited, if there would be restatements, misstatements, disagreements, we'd have to disclose it there. There are no such items to report on. We focus on the next slide on dollars, more quantitative view of how the county is doing. The first chart here shows your expenditures, so your spending, and it breaks down by category of functions. Again, some of you may not have colors on there. So from top to bottom, you have economic assistance and opportunity. Those are mostly your DSS spending. Then you have your general government support. We'll touch on that one. Then you have employee benefits, public safety, other, which include education, culture and recreation, transfers out. And then you have health. So that's from high to low. But just to touch on, the biggest one is your purple line. The second one, that's your general government support. Since the pandemic hit in 2020, you've seen that increase pretty significantly. That's your distribution of sales tax. So of course, sales tax has grown exponentially since the pandemic. This is the offset. This is the distribution of sales tax to localities. That also obviously increased. All other functions to note here, well, just to touch on the bottom number, your total expenditures in the general fund for 2023 was $143.7 million. That's up $8.2 million from the prior year. The bulk of that increase came in your general government support, distribution of sales tax. $2 million of that also came from growth in employee benefits for health insurance. Every so often, every 5 years, usually health insurance is going to go up significantly. That's what we're seeing here. Employee benefits going up. That dark line, black line, third line from the top. So $8.2 million increase in the prior year. Other increases happened in health. That's the bottom line, the green line. There was new mental health programs being offered, reimbursable costs. That's on increase. Columbia County, just like it did other counties, we do have the opportunity to work with 22 other counties in the state. So the trends that we're seeing here are similar trends that we're seeing across the city. On the next slide, your revenues, again, top to bottom for those that don't have colors. Top is your non-property tax, that's your sales tax. Then it's your real property tax in orange. State aid is the third. Federal aid, green is the fourth. Departmental income. Then you have other costs, which includes transfers in, it includes interest earnings there. And then the bottom one is your intergovernmental charges, the blue line. So really, on a revenue standpoint, 2023 had $150.3 million. That's an increase of $5.5 million from 2022. Where did that increase come from? $2 million of that was interest earnings, so maximizing those rates that are out there with cash that's available on hand. There's another kind of weird $1.3 million increase in revenues. That's really the result of the issuance of leases. It has to qualify as a revenue, but it's directly offset with its expenditure. So really a one-to-one. So really the true growth in revenue is more $4.2 million from the prior year. Most of it is interest earnings. The line that catches your eye, obviously, is the top one here. That's your sales tax. Again, back in 2020, we were told that sales tax was going to drop 20% when the pandemic hit. So when you were planning your 2023 budget, that's how you develop your expectations. Of course, that didn't happen. Sales tax actually grew 38% from 2019 to 2022. As you can see, it's starting to level out. There's some fears that that's potentially going to drop into 2025, potentially into 2024. We'll see how things end up. But it's certainly, we've been facing unprecedented years in the pandemic. It's good to kind of see the positive growth that has happened, but it certainly might not be the message for the future years. So just before I move into fund balance discussions, your revenue totals were 150 million. Your expenditure totals were 143.7 million. So the net change between your revenues and your expenditures was $6.6 million. That's the growth in fund balance that we'll talk about. Next slide, we like to show this chart just to show your reliance on certain revenue sources as compared to your total budget. The first one is on real property tax itself, which is a great chart to show that 5 years ago, you were relying on 27% of your real property tax budget, and you were able to decrease that reliance on property tax to 23% at the end of 2023. So you're relying on other sources of revenues to fund your budget, which is a great chart to show. Vice versa, if you're relying less on your real property tax, you're relying more on other forms of revenues, and that's what we see here. That's the net reliance on your net sales tax. So that's your gross sales tax revenue less your sales tax distribution. That went up from 27% in 2019, which is the last known regular year, to 32%, which has stayed consistent over the last 3 years. The argument here is that historical view of sales tax has been around that 27% number in 2019. So it's certainly not going to go down right to 27% next year. It might take time to get back down, but historical averages show us that your sales tax as a percent of your budget is about 27%. The next slide here is your fund balance as a percentage of your policy. So we show that as a percentage of your policy. So Columbia County fund balance policy strives to maintain 2 months worth of spending. It's unassigned fund balance, which is 16.67%, but no action is required unless it falls over 20%. And so these two charts, these later 2 years that we're showing in this chart, 2022 and 2023, you are over that 20% policy. So we're showing it here. We have responsibility to communicate that you exceed your policy. As of 9 months ago, knowing that certain spending has occurred since. But when we do compare you to other counties in the state, again, we have the opportunity to work with a lot of many counties, you're not at high levels compared to the others. You're pretty much right in the middle of average levels. And when you think about being fiscally prudent and you look at where you were 5 years ago in 2019, 70% and even lesser before that, it's a message where you've had these unprecedented years. You've carefully planned to replenish your fund balance since 2012-13 levels. And here you are now. And so looking ahead in the future, when everything's going to stabilize, whether it's interest earnings, whether it's sales tax, whether it's ARPA funds no longer being available, just certainly advisable to see where things are going to end up in 2024, 2025, 2026 before starting to spend that money down to get back to what levels where we were in 2012 and 2013.
Do you have a state average on that fund?
For counties?
Yeah.
I can send that separately after this presentation. All the data is available through Open Book New York, so we can send that.
Thank you.
I have a question that might or might not be a question. My understanding when the town created our fund balance policy from the comptroller is that they don't tell us what our percentage should be. They actually won't give any guidance, but they absolutely are not okay with you not being in line with your own policy. So should we potentially consider adjusting our fund balance policy if we're not going to spend down that fund balance? Because again, you said we're not high compared to other counties. They might have a fund balance policy that says they can have a little bit more. And again, comptroller to me said, we don't care if your fund balance policy says you can have 2 months or 5 months, but if you say 2 months and you have 3, we don't like that.
Great question. The fund balance, the right number is not out there anywhere. Government Finance Officers Association back in 2016 or 17 said 3 months is a good best practice. Many counties do not have fund balance policy. They don't want to restrict themselves to that. But at the same time, the counties that do have them are viewed more favorably when it's time to go out and issue some debt as far as credit ratings that you have one. So at the end of the day, when you do exceed, so the way this fund balance policy to me is written, we're not going to take any action until we exceed 20%. So strive for 2 months, but don't do any action until we reach 20%. When we reach 20%, we're going to discuss as a group, and we're going to find ways to spend down for one-time costs 9 months after the fact. Again, the audit is issued September 30th, 9 months after the fact. So as long as there's a plan to have those discussions to spend that down, of course, the following year might generate some additional earnings that weren't planned. So it probably doesn't answer your answer to most, but there are no right answer as far as percentages. A lot of it, I talk to villages a lot or towns. It's less about the percentage. It's more about the dollar that they have on hand. If they're faced with an emergency and they have to fix roads, or there's a flood, or whatever the case may be, how much money can they front without having to go out and issue debt and charge taxpayers the interest? Sometimes it's less about the percentage, more about actual money up front. But the OSC will not say what the right answer is, but they will say you do have policy.
I like that PJQ, our treasurer answer.
Yeah, I knew that was coming to me. Actually, in 2022, we ended up with an unassigned fund balance of about $29 million. And our fund balance policy says we should have about 24. So what we did is we allocated, if you remember, $6 million towards capital expenditures. $3 million of that was for 11 Warren Street. Another $3 million was for Ravens, bridges and roads. So we did take care of that. And I'll jump ahead because it'll come up again. The fund balance policy will be applied for 2024 as well.
Right. So when I'm reading that in 22, we were at 21.6%, 23, 22%. That was before we made the adjustments for the following year's budget.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a snapshot in time. So all of there might be decisions that have happened.
Okay. Thank you.
Second to last slide here, and very quick. I'm already past my time. Total fund balance, that's the snapshot of if we just take away the fund balance policy and focus on your total fund balance. Total fund balance at the end of December 31, 2023 was $48.5 million. Again, that's $6.6 million increase from the prior year. As you can see, efforts have also been made to double the reserves from where they were in 2019 at $8 million. So that rate portion at the top, $16.9 million, that includes your tax stabilization and capital projects reserves. There's also included in there outstanding purchase orders that are applied to the 2024 budget and your fund balance that has been assigned in it. So your unassigned fund balance, as we talked on the last slide, is $31.6 million. And then the last slide here, we started showing last year, and we show again this year, is your solid waste fund. And when we show financial statements, This fund is presented as an enterprise, so it shows all long-term assets and long-term liabilities. It doesn't just show your day-to-day operation like your general fund does. And so a lot of those changes that are in there are gonna negatively impact that fund because you have to account for long-term liabilities like your net pension liability or OPEB liability. So there is a large deficit. But when we move the long-term items and we just focus on the operations and cash flow from operations, you see here 9 straight years of negative cash flow from operations. As an enterprise fund, it's meant to be self-sustaining. So expenses of this fund are supposed to be funded with fees charged residents for this particular fund. So just one to keep an eye on. It doesn't change how we audit it, whether it's in a deficit or not, it's still being audited. We're just looking ahead as far as decision-making. It's always a discussion and we know it's being discussed. But just additional data for you guys to look at when you're making some decisions.
Do you have any, information from other counties that are facing similar issues with the negative?
I'd have to look particularly for solid waste fund, but yeah, so there's a lot of enterprise funds that these discussions are being had. Solid waste is one of them. The cost of treating water funds is another one. Hospitals and nursing homes throughout the state, these discussions, political discussions of should we be maintaining the service? Should we be moving it to the general fund? How much should we raise our rates? These are all tough decisions that have to be made. There's no right answer. But as it stands now, it's an enterprise fund. For accounting purposes, it should be self-sustaining, and that's why we show this chart. So I don't have a right answer, but these trends are happening for.
Yeah, I understand that we've faced nursing homes and hospitals before. I just, the change of expenses over since 2021, where we had a near balanced budget in 20 is dramatic. So I want to see if other people are facing such dramatic changes in negative revenue.
Yeah, I can take a look. Get more data on top of the percentages.
Thank you.
So that's it. The observations, I said I talked about, I touched on the management letter. In our management letter that's issued, we have one comment on the general fund policy that I talked about. Nothing more than we'll discuss already. There's a comment on the solid waste deficit. Again, it's an enterprise fund that we've touched on. The other one is the road machinery fund. Road machinery fund is showing a deficit of $700,000 at the end of 2023. Again, a trend that we're seeing statewide, whether it's the cost of equipment, whether it's the cost of materials, equipment, utilities. We see a lot more reliance on the general fund to help fund. They're increasing their transfers to county road fund, road machinery funds to help balance those increasing costs. So just a reassessment of the types of equipment we need. If other entities or departments are not using it, just continue to have those discussions on those particular funds and deficits. So you have the general fund, as we saw, it had some positive charts with the pandemic and sales tax. Then you have other funds to talk about, your solid waste and your road machinery fund. So I guess balance all around. So clean audit, happy to answer any questions, but my information is on there. If you have any questions later on throughout the year, we are available at any time. Yes.
When you're looking at fund balance policies, do you ever distinguish between general funds and highway funds?
It's a good question. I don't, usually entities don't go outside the general fund, but it's the same point. Any governmental fund should plan on setting what credit agencies would obviously love is that every governmental fund paying for operations would have something that would say, we're trying to maintain either unassigned fund balance or assigned fund balance because those other funds don't have unassigned fund balance. All their fund balance falls down to the bottom line, which they call assigned for that fund's use. So it's always the same goal to maintain about 2 months. That's the best practice. Again, no one's going to come out and say the right numbers. No one wants to be bound by it, but it's always, they believe an emergency is covered with 2 months worth of spending.
Just the moving parts are different in those two funds.
Yes, and there's a lot more variables in those machinery funds.
Okay, thank you.
One big fuel that usually and the volatility of fuel prices.
Well, that's one.
And the cost of equipment has changed.
Partial balance. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll show you. Okay, I need a motion to pay the bills, accept the treasurer's report, file the minutes for business first.
So moved.
Second motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. I'd like to ask the clerk to read the resolutions.
Resolution 369 of 2024 to 383 of 2024 by Supervisor Collins.
Mr. Chairman, I offer these resolutions for adoption.
Second motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Resolution 384 of 2024 to 397 of 2024 by Supervisor Weigel.
Mr. Chairman, I offer these resolutions for adoption.
Second motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Making sense.
Do any supervisors have any business to bring before the board? Supervisor Stats.
Chairman, I'd just like to encourage you, after this report, to take a look at this year's budget and the tax increases planned again this year for increasing taxes, which I'm assuming you're probably putting in a 2% increase. But I'm going to start now instead of wait for the budget, because I'm not for spending down our fund balance. I think we need to add the fund balance, but as I've said for years, we voted against the budget for many years, that we did not need to keep raising taxes to do this. And as you can see, our fund balance has jumped tremendously over the past 4 years. Every time where I've said, please don't raise taxes. We don't need to raise taxes. So the evidence shows that we have built our fund balance over and over and over every year. And even if we didn't increase taxes to $1 million, then we get it to 2%, we'd still increase our fund balance over the past several years. So moving forward, I'm hoping you please consider with no tax increase for the residents this year. And I'm sure we'll probably still raise our fund balance size. So please consider that.
Thank you for your input. Supervisor Collins.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Supervisor Lagonia, Treasurer Keeler, Supervisor Adams for continuing the conversations with the rescue squads that serve our county, and get everyone to the table to address some of the concerns of the Fitch report, some of the concerns of the rescue squads as well. I mean, I think it's really critical that everyone is aware of what goes on. For those supervisors that aren't, it would be a good thing to sit in on and learn, especially if you dealt with a rescue squad that at one time had significant vulnerabilities. So thank you, Supervisor Lagonia, DJ. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Supervisor Collins. Supervisor Boatman.
I don't have business. I was just hoping we might take a moment of silence for our friends in Florida right now. A bad storm is hitting, as well as the Carolinas and Georgia.
Prior to adjournment, you can take a moment.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. So with that, let's take a moment of silence for people in Florida. Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Someone